Welcome, brothers and sisters. California, the Sunshine State. The state with a population and economy so large that it could be compared to another small country, from Spanish to Mexican to independent to American. Home of the Gold Rush, Yosemite, Crips, Bloods, and so much more. How did the California of today come to be? Historians don't have an exact date, but it's assumed that Native American tribes began inhabiting the land of modern-day California around 100,000 BC. These early settlers came from Asia, likely across the Bering Straits, and would soon diversify into more than 100 separate tribes totaling anywhere from roughly 100,000 to 300,000 individuals. These tribes had their own cultures and ways of life and inhabited the state on their own for thousands of years, until Moorish dark-skinned European colonizers touched down on Californian land. The black conqueror Juan Garrido, who was really the captain of the ship Hernán Cortés, came on during the explorations in 1534. They're trying to cross you up with the slave narrative. In order to understand the demographic of California, we must tell you of the Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition was a Catholic religious court established in 1478 by King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile to maintain Catholic orthodoxy in their kingdoms. It was intended to identify and punish heretics, particularly indigenous people who inherit land through the mother's line. Also known as matrilineal inheritance or matrilineal descent, means that individuals trace their lineage and often inherit property, titles, or social status through their maternal ancestors, not their paternal ancestors. You see, heresy is a play on words. It really means inheritance. Inheritance is the practice of receiving private property, titles, debts, entitlements, privileges, rights, and obligations upon the death of an individual. The rules of inheritance differ among societies and have changed over time. In simple terms, heresy is a belief or opinion that goes against the established doctrines, Nicene Creed, or beliefs of a particular religion or group. It's essentially disagreeing with the accepted dogma of that belief system. The Inquisition operated for over 300 years, extending its reach throughout Spain, Portugal, and the Spanish colonies, including North, South, and Central America. The Inquisition aimed to combat heresy, which was defined as deviation from Catholic doctrine. It focused particularly on individuals who wasn't Christian and inherit land by birthrights. The Inquisition employed a variety of methods, including the Edict of Grace, which offered mercy to those who confessed to heresy, and the public auto de fe, a ceremony where accused individuals were paraded, their confessions read, and their sentences declared. The Inquisition also used secret accusations, anonymous tip-offs, and torture to extract confessions. You see, if you practiced inheritance and you were indigenous living off the land, you were considered to be a witch and warlock. The Spanish Inquisition did extend its reach to Spanish colonies in the Americas, including New Spain. However, the Inquisition's formal presence was not established in Alta California, present-day California. The missions in Alta California were established by Franciscan missionaries, led by figures like Junipero Serra. These missions were part of a broader Spanish effort to colonize and Christianize the region. The Spanish colonization of California, including the mission system, significantly impacted the indigenous populations. Native people were forced to convert to Catholicism, work on the missions, and were often subjected to harsh punishments for perceived transgressions. In a matrilineal system, the primary connection for kinship is through the mother, and children are considered part of the same descent group as their mothers. Concepts: paternal versus patrilineal and maternal versus matrilineal. Matrilineal descent emphasizes the female line, meaning individuals are linked to their mothers, grandmothers, and so on, rather than their fathers and grandfathers. In some matrilineal societies, property and status are inherited through the mother's line, typically by the mother's son, daughter, or other matrilineal relatives. Matrilineal systems can significantly shape social structures and influence who holds power and responsibility within a family or community. Matrilineal descent is found in various cultures, including some Native American tribes like the Crow and Cherokee, and among certain groups in Southeast Asia. This is different from patrilineal descent, where lineage and inheritance are traced through the father's line. The Doctrine of Discovery was a legal and religious principle used by European powers to justify the colonization of non-Christian lands, including the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Australia. Essentially, it asserted that Christian explorers, when discovering lands not inhabited by Christians, could claim sovereignty and ownership in the name of their respective monarchs and pope. This doctrine, rooted in papal decrees and the concept of terra nullius, empty land, disregarded the pre-existing inhabitants and their claims to the land. The doctrine of discovery was often framed as a religious imperative, with the goal of spreading Christianity and saving non-Christian populations. The principle of terra nullius held that lands not occupied by Christians were considered empty or vacant, regardless of whether indigenous populations already lived there. Several papal bulls, particularly Inter Caetera, issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1493, formalized the doctrine of discovery and granted specific rights to European powers, such as Spain and Portugal. The doctrine of discovery had significant consequences, including the displacement and subjugation of indigenous peoples, the loss of ancestral lands, and the imposition of European political and cultural systems. While the doctrine of discovery is no longer actively enforced, its legacy continues to shape legal and political discussions regarding indigenous rights, land ownership, and colonial history. Now, like we said, Moorish dark-skinned European colonizers touched down on Californian land. The black conqueror Juan Garrido, who was really the captain of the ship Hernán Cortés, came on the explorations in 1534. While the conquest of California by the United States occurred in 1846–47, this was a different historical event, involving American forces and the Mexican government. Garrido, a Moorish African man of the Kingdom of Congo, was a Spanish black conquistador who participated in various expeditions in Spanish America, including Baja California, part of the present-day state of California. He is considered one of the first Moorish Africans to reach the shore of California. Garrido served under Cortés, who led expeditions that included exploring the Pacific coast and Baja California. Spanish colonization efforts in California, including the establishment of missions and presidios, began in the late 17th century, culminating in 1769. Conquest of California, 1846–47. This was a separate event, a military conflict between the United States and Mexico, resulting in the American takeover of California. Key points about Garrido's role. He was part of the Spanish colonial efforts in the Americas, which involved the subjugation of indigenous populations and the use of enslaved labor. His journey to Baja California in 1534 places him in the territory that would eventually become California, though his role was not as a conqueror in the sense of the Mexican-American War. Garrido's story highlights the involvement of people of Moorish African descent in the early Spanish colonial era, a history often overlooked. More individuals accompanied the Spanish conquistadors and other European colonizers to California, but the specific details of their first arrival and settlement are somewhat complex and debated. While there's no single definitive first arrival, Moorish African descent individuals were present in early Spanish explorations and settlements in the Americas, including in regions that would later become California. California is a republic. As a state within the United States, it has a republican form of government, meaning that power is held by elected representatives who represent the people. While there was a brief period in 1846 when a group of rebels declared an independent California Republic, also known as the Bear Flag Republic, this republic was short-lived and never officially recognized. California officially became part of the United States in 1850. Today, California is governed by a republican system with elected officials in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. A republic, based on the Latin phrase res publica, public affair or people's affair, is a state in which political power rests with the public, people, typically through their representatives, in contrast to a monarchy. Although a republic is most often a single sovereign state, subnational state entities that have governments that are republican in nature may be referred to as republics. The next known European to reach the gorgeous coasts of California was Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo in 1542. Cabrillo's expedition had been launched from modern-day Mexico, known then as the Viceroyalty of New Spain, and ended up in San Diego Bay. The expedition was rather fruitless, however, as Cabrillo failed to discover anything that he viewed as worth the trouble for Spain to colonize. He left, and California remained untouched by European hands. Occasional ships, such as those from the Spanish East Indies traders, would at times touch down on California's coasts, but the idea of colonizing the territory still remained unconsidered. Even when English explorer Francis Drake plundered his way into Oregon and California, claiming the lands for his homeland, no real settlement of any sort was actually set up. Less than 30 years later, in 1602, another Spanish sailor, this one by name of Sebastián Vizcaíno, set off for the coast of California in the name of New Spain and hopeful expansion. He too found San Diego Bay as well as Monterey Bay. Yet again, no colony. It wasn't until decades later that the Spanish finally got around to actually setting up camp in what they were now calling Alta California. This region was to be a province of New Spain alongside Baja California below it. Franciscan missionaries would become the first to set up real permanent settlements in the region. 1769 would see the first mission be established alongside California's first presidio located in today's San Diego. More than another dozen missions would spring up in succession across Alta California as more and more Franciscans aimed to convert the local indigenous population to Christianity. The general effort to colonize the region, however, was poorly funded and supported as the Spanish North American holdings were slowly pushing the bounds of what the empire could handle. And the Spanish relationship with the natives in Alta California was complicated to say the very least. While the missionaries hoped to teach the indigenous people their Spanish culture and beliefs, they also attempted to take advantage of the natives and utilize them for free labor while keeping them organized on small portions of the land that had once entirely belonged to the indigenous. In response to this sudden encroachment and missionary conquest, the natives organized several revolts, which made the already unapproachable land even less appealing to new colonists. Alta California was remote in contrast to other Spanish territories, and the lack of adequate funding left small numbers of friars and soldiers solely in charge of the settlement and missionary establishment. Nevertheless, the Spaniards were tenacious, and the following year saw the accidental discovery of San Francisco after the explorers failed to recognize Sebastian Vizcaino's description of Monterey Bay, and thus sailed on past it. Further expeditions did uncover more of Northern California as the missions continued to pop up, but life in Alta California failed to become easier. Shortages of crucial goods including food, disease, and frequent violence with the natives led to many close calls of abandoning the new province. Still, the colonists remained and were continuing to fill the maps with missions, presidios, and pueblos, many of which we know as cities today like Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, Monterey, and Santa Cruz. It seemed that Spain had at least secured itself a functioning new province, until the Mexican War of Independence. Mulattoes in the missions. Beginning in 1769, individuals of mixed Moors, African and Moor and Pale European descent, known as mulattoes, were documented as participants in the founding of San Diego, 1769, Monterey, 1770, and San Francisco, 1776. In the early colonial settlements, Moorish African descent soldiers were part of the garrisons, for example, in the settlement of San Luis Obispo, where 5 of the 6 soldiers were of Moorish African descent. Juan Garrido. A notable figure was Juan Garrido, a black conquistador who journeyed to Baja California with Cortez. While most Moorish African-descended people in early America were enslaved, some were free and participated in the colonization effort. It's important to remember that while some enslaved Africans may have initially arrived in California alongside the Spanish, they were later subjected to enslavement or forced labor, a fact that complicates the narrative of their first arrival. The U.S. gained California after the Mexican-American War, specifically through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Mexico ceded Alta California, along with other northern territories, to the U.S. in exchange for a payment of $15 million. California became the 31st state on September 9, 1850. Mexican-American War. The U.S. and Mexico fought a war from 1846 to 1848, primarily over territorial disputes. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This treaty, signed in February 1848, officially ended the war and led to Mexico ceding a large portion of its northern territory, including California, to the U.S.-Mexican cession. The territory acquired from Mexico in the treaty is often referred to as the Mexican cession. California's statehood. California was admitted to the Union on September 9, 1850, becoming the 31st state. Gold rush. The discovery of gold in California in 1848 spurred a massive influx of people to the territory, which contributed to the need for a formal government and statehood. The 1821 war saw Mexico break free from the Spanish and Alta California tag, along with the neighboring lands. It was now a Mexican territory, not Spanish, and the mission culture began to shift in the direction of a ranching culture. There was also an uptick in trade thanks to the new policies of the Mexican government, and immigrants from the neighboring American colonies, along with European migrants, began filling in the gaps of California's population left behind by the declining number of indigenous. The consequence of the latter fact, however, was the slow collapse of the missions, which relied on their population of converted natives to stay afloat. What remained of the missions was soon secularized by the Mexican government in the 1830s, and the original Alta California settlers were having to share land with a growing number of American migrants who would soon outnumber their predecessors to the region. The following decade thus saw these new American Californians stage an uprising against the unstable and preoccupied Mexican government. The summer of 1846 would mark this so-called Bear Flag Revolt. The revolutionaries raised the now famous flag of their newly declared California Republic as they demanded ultimate independence. While the revolt broke out on June 14th and found speedy success, by mid-July, the Bear Flaggers were informed that the United States, who had declared war on Mexico 2 months earlier, much to their surprise, had already captured Monterey and declared it American territory. The rebels now had two options: take up arms against another nation to maintain their newly founded independence, or accept American authority without a fight. Since the early goal of the Bear Flaggers had actually been to make California an American possession, the decision was quite an easy one. With the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo on February 2, 1848, the Mexican-American War came to an end and California was made an official possession of the United States. 2 years later, California would become the 31st state of the United States of America. But before that, James W. Marshall found gold. The famous California gold rush began at Sutter's Mill, nestled on the American River in Coloma, California, when Marshall discovered gold on January 24, 1848, while at his sawmill. The immediate reaction to the news brought in migrants from nearby and outside of America's borders, particularly Mexico, China, and Chile. But after the endorsement of the announcement by President James Polk, the era of the 49ers began. Prospectors from all around the U.S., Australia, Europe, and even Asia were flooding the state throughout 1849 and caused the population to triple. Businesses and mines were springing up around Northern California as gold became everyone's focus. It's believed that between 1850 and 1859 alone, somewhere around 28,280,711 ounces of gold were discovered. With an additional 300,000 people now calling California home, the gold rush came to an end and the state somehow managed to skate by as the American Civil War played out, spilling brotherly blood all across the southern and eastern states. California's agriculture now had a unique chance to develop, as did its rail systems, economy, and general development. The once sparse and unattractive land that the Spaniards had found and passed up time after time was becoming a rising star within the United States. All the while, however, life for native Californians was worsening. Those who had managed to survive abuse, disease, and seclusion were now secured onto reservations by the government, and their population numbers were on a constant downhill tumble. Still, life in California went on. The state's modern history is no less busy than the rest, and the 20th century saw California in a constant state of adaptation. After much growth and progress, San Francisco felt the first tragedy in California's recent past when a fatally colossal earthquake hit on April 18, 1906. The effects were utterly catastrophic, leaving 28,000 buildings damaged beyond repair, 250,000 people without homes, and a now estimated 3,000 dead. Though San Francisco would recover, the loss of life and property continues today to serve as a reminder of what the earth under California's soil can accomplish. When the Great Depression hit the United States, however, fear of another earthquake was too small an angst when compared to the comforts and opportunities California provided to those fleeing the Dust Bowl states of the Midwest. Even after World War II, many surviving soldiers saw the state as an ideal home. The Great Migration refers to the movement of approximately 6 million African Americans from the South to northern, Midwestern, and Western states, including California, between 1910 and 1970. This westward migration was driven by both economic opportunities and an escape from racial violence and discrimination in the South. California, particularly cities like Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco, became significant destinations. The Great Migration was fueled by the need for labor in northern and western industries, especially during and after World War II. Cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco experienced rapid population growth and economic expansion, attracting black workers. The desire to escape the racial violence and discrimination of the Jim Crow South was a major motivator for many migrants. California, particularly major cities, offered a different environment with more opportunities, though still facing challenges like segregation and discrimination. The Second Great Migration, which occurred after World War II, saw more Black Americans migrating westward to cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, seeking jobs in the defense industry and escaping racial discrimination. The Great Migration significantly impacted California's cultural landscape, with Black migrants establishing their own communities and contributing to the state's diverse cultural identity. The Great Riot in California refers to the 1992 Los Angeles riots, also known as the Rodney King riots or the South Central riots. These were a series of civil disturbances that erupted in Los Angeles County after a jury acquitted 4 LAPD officers of using excessive force in the arrest and beating of Rodney King, a video of which had been widely broadcast. The riots resulted in widespread violence, looting, arson, and property damage, lasting for about 6 days and causing significant disruption and loss of life. The acquittal of the LAPD officers in the Rodney King case sparked outrage among many in the Black community, particularly in South Central Los Angeles, due to years of grievances over police brutality and systemic racism. The riots spread beyond South Central Los Angeles, affecting various parts of the city, including Beverly Hills, according to Wikipedia. The riots included looting, arson, and acts of violence, targeting both businesses and vehicles, with more than 1,000 buildings damaged or destroyed and approximately 2,000 Korean-run businesses also damaged. The riots resulted in the deaths of 63 people, over 2,000 injuries, and the arrest of almost 4,000 individuals. They also caused an estimated $1 billion in property damage, according to CNN. The riots highlighted existing tensions between the Black community and the Korean American community, many of whom owned businesses in low-income neighborhoods, says CNN. California's economy thus benefited even further, and prosperity returned to the short-lived republic. By the middle of the 1960s, California's population had already earned itself the title of the nation's largest, a fact that still rings true today. Other significant events in the state's modern history included multiple hefty earthquakes, social justice movements that spread to the rest of the nation, a 1969 Native American occupation of Alcatraz Island, and so much more. Today, California sits as one of America's most important states on multiple levels. Its geography, economy, culture, and history are vast and varied. What we remember of the state's past is often focused primarily on its role in the Wild West as the home of the gold rush, in addition to the more modern designation as the home of cinema and fame. But California's time as a home to the indigenous, a Spanish colony, a Mexican province, an independent republic, and at long last as a U.S. state are all equally distinguished and necessary periods of the land's past. It's California's bustling history that made it the extraordinary place that it is today. The California Indian Wars encompass a series of conflicts between Native American tribes and primarily the United States government and settlers, spanning from the mid-19th to the early 20th centuries. Key aspects of the California Indian Wars. Motivations for conflict. The primary drivers of these conflicts were competition over land and resources, exacerbated by the California Gold Rush, which brought a massive influx of settlers and miners seeking fortune. The Mariposa War, 1850 to 1851. This conflict, also known as the Yosemite Indian War, involved the Ahwahnechee and other tribes in the Sierra Nevada region who resisted the intrusion of miners and settlers. The Modoc War, 1872 to 1873. This war is considered the only major Native American war fought in California and involved the Modoc tribe who resisted being forced onto a reservation. Numerous other conflicts and massacres. The California Indian Wars were marked by many smaller-scale battles, skirmishes, and massacres perpetrated by both sides according to Wikipedia. Impact on Native Americans. The wars, along with the devastating effects of disease and forced relocation, resulted in a drastic decline in the Native American population in California. Government policy and violence. The California state government and the U.S. federal government played a role in enabling and sometimes directly participating in violence against Native Americans, often through the use of militias and military expeditions. Legalized exploitation. Laws like the California Act for the Government and Protection of Indians, 1850, facilitated the enslavement and forced labor of Native Americans, further contributing to their suffering. Legacy. The California Indian Wars and the resulting violence and displacement have had a lasting impact on California's indigenous populations, including the loss of land, cultural practices, and political sovereignty. It is crucial to note that the California Indian Wars are now widely recognized as a period of genocide against Native Americans in California. The California Gold Rush and the influx of settlers dramatically altered the landscape and disrupted the traditional way of life for Native Californians. The California government's policies, including the establishment of reservations and the forced removal of tribes, contributed to the conflict and suffering. The Black Panther Party was founded in Oakland, California, in 1966 by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. It was a revolutionary Black Power organization that initially focused on protecting African American neighborhoods from police brutality through armed patrols. The party later expanded its agenda to advocate for broader social and political reforms, including free breakfast programs for children, health clinics, and educational initiatives. The party was formed in Oakland in 1966, rooted in Black nationalism and advocating for self-defense and social justice. The Panthers initially patrolled African American neighborhoods to protect residents from police brutality. They established various community programs like the Free Breakfast for Children program, free health clinics, and educational initiatives. The Panthers advocated for broader social and political reforms, including affordable housing, education, and political control through local elections. The party's legacy is complex and controversial, with both admiration for their community work and criticism for their militant tactics. The party's legacy continues to be explored and debated, with ongoing efforts to preserve their history and understand their impact. A museum in Oakland dedicated to the Black Panther Party showcases the group's history and programs, offers a detailed exploration of the Black Panther Party's history and impact in Oakland, provides information on the Black Panther Party and its place within the Black Power movement, offers a comprehensive overview of the Black Panther Party, its ideology, and its history. The Crips and Pirus, also known as Bloods, are two notorious street gangs that originated in Los Angeles, California, and have a long history of rivalry and conflict. Origin and growth. The Crips are one of the largest and most violent gangs in the United States, according to the city of Everett, Washington. They originated in Los Angeles in the late 1960s. Colors and identification. Crips commonly identify with the color blue and often use blue clothing or accessories to signify their affiliation. Criminal activities. Crips are involved in a wide range of criminal activities, including murder, robberies, and drug dealing. Internal rivalries. While known for their rivalry with the Bloods, Crips also experience internal conflicts and rivalries between different sets, smaller groups or factions within the larger gang. 1. The Pirus, Bloods. Origin as a Crip set. The Pirus initially started as a Crip set, a subgroup within the Crips in Compton, California, around 1969. Formation of the Bloods. Due to escalating conflicts and violence with other Crip sets, the Pirus broke away and formed an alliance with other gangs targeted by the Crips. This alliance eventually became known as the Bloods. Rivalry with the Crips. The Bloods are the Crips' main rivals, and this rivalry has led to significant gang-related violence and murders, especially in southern Los Angeles. Colors and identification. Bloods commonly identify with the color red and often use red clothing or accessories to signify their affiliation. 1. The Crips-Bloods rivalry, long-standing conflict. The Crips-Bloods rivalry is one of the most well-known and violent gang rivalries in the United States, spanning several decades. Violence and impact. The rivalry has resulted in numerous deaths and has had a significant impact on communities, particularly in Los Angeles and other areas where the gangs have a presence. Cultural impact. The Crips and Bloods have also had a significant impact on popular culture, particularly in music, with numerous references in hip-hop and other genres. In summary, the Crips and Pirus are two major street gangs with a long history of conflict and violence. The Pirus, initially part of the Crips, broke away to form the Bloods, creating one of the most well-known and enduring gang rivalries in the United States. The Indigenous Peoples of California are the indigenous inhabitants who have previously lived or currently live within the current boundaries of California before and after the arrival of Europeans. Achomawi, Achumawi, Pit River Tribe, Northeastern California, Atsugewi, Northeastern California, Awanechi, Eastern Central California, Cahuilla, Southern California, Chumash, coastal Southern California, Barbareno, Cruzeno, Island Chumash, Inazeno, Inaceno, Obispeno, Northern Chumash, Purissimeno Ventureno, Cholula, Northwestern California, Chimarrico, extinct, Northwestern California, Coso, Southeastern California, Cupeno, Southern California, Eel River, Athapascan Peoples, Lassic, Northwestern California, Matol, Bear River, Northwestern California, Nongadal, Northwestern California, Sinkion, Northwestern California, Wailaki, Northwestern California, Esalen, West Central California, Hoopa, Northwestern California, Snungwe, Waneno, Achachimem, Southwestern California, Karak, Northwestern California, Cato, Northwestern California, Kawaiisu, Southern Central California, Kitanamuk, Southern Central California, Kij, Southern California, Concau, Northern Central California, Cucaricati, Eastern Central California, Kumeyaay, Diegueno, Kumeyaay, Southern California, Cuyamaca Complex, Late Holocene Pre-Columbian Culture, Ipai, Southwestern California, Jamul, Southwestern California, Tipai, Southwestern California and Northwestern Mexico, La Jolla Complex, Southern California, c. 6050, 1000 BCE, Luiseno, Southwestern California, Maidu, Northeastern California, Concau, Northern California, Mecuphta, Northern California, Nisenan, Southern Maidu, Eastern Central California, Miwok, Central California, Coast Miwok, West Central California, Lake Miwok, West Central California, Saklan, West Central California, Valley and Sierra Miwok, Eastern Central California, Mojave, Southeastern California, Monash, Western Mono, Central California, Mono, Eastern Central California, Nomlaki, Northwestern California, Olone, Costanoan, West Central California, Muwekma, Awaswas, Shalon, Chochenyo, Karkin, Mutsun, Ramaytush, Rumson, Tamyen, Yelamu, Patayan, Southern California, Patwin, Central California, Suisun, Southern Patwin, Central California, Palma Complex, Southern California, Ka, 6050, 1000 BCE, Pomo, Northwestern and Central Western California, Salinan, Coastal Central California, Antoniano, Migueleno, Serrano, Southern California, Shasta, Northwestern California, Konomihu, Northwestern California, Okwanuchu, Northwestern California, Tataviam, Alilik, Fernandino, Southern California, Timbisha, Southeastern California, Tolowa, Northwestern California, Tubatulabo, South Central California, Bancalachi, on west slopes of the Greenhorn Mountains, Palajawan, on the Kern River above its confluence with the South Fork of the Kern River, Tubatulabo, on the lower reaches of South Fork of the Kern River, Wapo, North Central California, Washoe, Northeastern California, Wilcutt, Northwestern California, Wintu, Northwestern California, Wyatt, Northwestern California, Yana, Northern Central California, Yahi, Yokuts, Central and Southern California, Chuchansi, Foothill Yokuts, Central California, Northern Valley Yokuts, Central California, Tachi Tribe, Southern Valley Yokuts, South Central California, Yuki, Ukomnom, Northwestern California, Uknom, Northwestern California,